Hello all, and thank you for being here. I've got a fantastic panel with me. You know, I know them through various avatars. So I know Sid from the time he was with Vodafone. And to all of you here, I think the greatest thing he did was not awards that they won, but for championing the Asha and Bala series of ads. I mean, I fell in love with them. I think, that was a very seminal sort of campaign for Vodafone. Here on my left, I love him for two reasons. One is, of course, he heads Spotify. And who loves Spotify? Put up your hands. Who loves Spotify? So, yeah, I love Spotify. But more than that, I think he was a buyer of great creative. I think that these two on my left, they have that. It is not easy in a high-pressure business to buy great creative. So Siddharth did that, so did Amarjit when he was with OLX. And all of you remember great OLX advertising, fun, engaging OLX advertising. He was responsible. So I think the buyer sometimes has a great pulse on where creativity is heading. And on my right, I've got PG Aditiya, who worked on boring stuff like Google and all that. But now he works on nice brands. He does stuff for Swiggy, he does stuff for Flipkart, I think Google Pay, Uber, all cool brands. He doesn't look cool, but he works on cool brands. But the reason for this discussion is more because of what happens anecdotally. Too often I hear, is digital dead? I mean, is analog dead? Is television dead? Is digital killing storytelling? And, you hear it so often it gets very tiring. But then you also want the answer. About a week ago, Siddharth was in Goa, not on holiday. He was speaking at an event. And I was in Goa the next day speaking at the same event. And, I worked hard on that presentation. And I was convinced that everybody's getting this wrong. The marketing has not changed. Idea generation has not changed. You didn't have special television expertise in 1982 when everybody started advertising on television. Suddenly we've got it wrong because digital has taken center stage as if the idea no longer is important. I think anything that you see on digital where, it grabs your attention fundamentally happens because it's a great idea. Yeah? So I'm going to cut myself short there and then go to Siddharth and say, Siddharth, has digital killed storytelling?
Okay. This question could have been very wonderfully answered by my good friend and co-author, Roshan Abbas, who just stepped off the stage. He's a storyteller, as some of you, or maybe all of you know. And in fact, he's embraced digital with kind of both hands and full fervor. So therefore, my premise here is that digital has actually led to more forms of storytelling. And indeed, digital is leading to, in a way, a renaissance in storytelling. So instead of digital killing storytelling, it's about the various forms and possibilities that digital has now enabled storytellers to do. But let me spend just 30 seconds deciphering that there is actually no such thing as digital, as all of us know. When you just deconstruct the word digital, you have social media platforms, you have the emergence of voice, you have fascinating possibilities with respect to display, etc., on various different devices. So from the old times of yore, where you used to have some media vehicles, to now the explosion of stuff that can happen, I think digital has enabled us in very many different ways to tell stories.
Right. And very many different ways is the correct thing. Here I see a new campaign for Spotify. And that campaign uses, to my mind, the second oldest medium available in India. I think the oldest medium was print, the second oldest was outdoor. But it hit me everywhere from home to office, and I saw 8 wonderful creatives. Again, that's why I say you're a good buyer of creative. But tell me, in your role as Spotify, how will your storytelling change? Because at OLX, you were a huge user of television. Yeah? What are we going to see on Spotify?
Yeah, I think that it was the first campaign for Spotify, but I think to the topic of digital killing storytelling, I think you'll probably start with this. I think because I think it depends on how you look at the word killing. I think some youngsters will say digital is really killing storytelling. Yeah. And actually that's happening because it's not because our interpretation might be different. Yeah. So what's happening at Spotify is that we just launched. So I think we decided to go for a non-TV campaign basically, and I think we chose, of course, we realized that what's the area we want to focus on. I think we realized we need to focus on something which is our biggest strength, which is playlist, which is a 3 billion playlist which we have. And say that seems to be a good differentiator. How do we bring it out?
And that was a single headline story.
Absolutely. So I think
that's it.
When you think of, I think the storytelling or anything starts from the idea first, or the core thing should be strong enough. And I think that piece that we realized was that we need to isolate to one thing that we want to convey. It started off from that, and it was very difficult to reach out to that one thing because in a market where so much is happening, is difficult. And we started from there, and we went out, and when we started carving out that piece, we realized it's many ways we can kind of tell that, and we realized it's an interpretation for everybody. It's a different interpretation. So there we brought it when life, throws a problem at you. I think there's a playlist for that. So that actually expanded itself and realized that as we go down, what's the best way to convey? And then outdoors, because of this hyper-local, I think from trains to colleges to places, it became a very interesting playground to convey that story.
Right.
We actually went out and created a lot on social media also, through many ways out there, even on radio. But I think outdoors stood out because it was so contextual, and maybe it's sometimes more powerful for that particular medium. Yeah.
So, PG, the argument I've been having endlessly is, you can have a digital department and TV expedition, whatever, and they can all die and rot unless you have a big idea. So tell me, what is it, in an ideal world, I want this debate to stop, at least for the people in this room. I'd say digital hasn't killed storytelling. Storytelling is there, and you use digital. Yeah, so tell me how you deal with it.
So I completely agree with you. I am tired of, I want to get past this question as well. So let's get down to some actual ground level agency realities, right? When we say storytelling is dead, what we actually mean
I didn't say storytelling.
I'm sorry. When we say digital is killed storytelling, when we have an accused also there, if that's the question, the truth is what I think digital is killed is not storytelling entirely, but craft in storytelling. I think craft overall as a space because we've seen more volume of content, do we see as much effort invested in craft? And I mean copywriting craft, I mean design craft, I mean film craft. That is slowly being killed. I do not disagree with that as well. And why is this happening?
I do, but I'll come to that. Yeah.
Even I disagree. So
Yeah.
Okay, superb. So, couple of points on why when I say craft, here's what I mean, right? We are talking about, let's say, all of us, and I think in Curious as well, there is we all know that your regular 16:9 format for a 30-second TVC no longer holds. How many production houses do we know who are as on board the philosophy of doing format innovations, of doing the 6-second, 10-second, 15-second commercials? Let's say a YouTube pre-roll campaign. We don't have as many top-tier production houses with the same level of talent which you'd expect to do the regular TVC, being as interested and being as active to do all of these newer pieces as well.
I'm going to interrupt Aditya here. I'm going to pull rank and age.
Please.
So I saw the first television channel being born in India. That was Zee, who sponsor MELT. And at that time, how many people knew how to make TV programs? It was nobody. And then I saw the wonderful sort of explosion of music television. And I don't know how many of you are old enough to know, but BPLOA was a great show on Channel V. How many people know BPLOA? Oh, okay, there's still some old people in the room. Now, what is astonishing about that is that BPLOA, the producers made 25 lakhs an episode, simply because so few people knew how to make a producer program. And that was an age. And then that 25 lakhs came down to about 2 lakhs by the end of the century, came down to 75,000 by 2003, 2004. So I think, it's to say craft has died. I think people will, because there's a market for it, they will learn. And they will do all those things. Yeah?
I think the question is about, I think we start getting into the, something is dying. I think the question is, I think, just step back and say, what is happening? I think what is happening is, I'll give you maybe a story, I think, around it. Maybe that will be an easier one to understand. So let's go back and look at, which is the sport India was the best in. If you go back and say 20, 30, 40 years back, hockey. How many Olympic medals did we win? So what happened there? We were the best in dribbling, enjoyable, just like everything. And suddenly the game's rules were changed. So point is, we used to stick, the ball used to stick to the hockey, like a magnet, okay, in bumps and holes and grass. That was the kind of a talent we had. And suddenly somebody comes and says, I think this is not, we can't really capture this. We can't become as good as that. So let's change the game of it. And I think the AstroTurf came in that time.
Okay.
And AstroTurf, as it came down, the rules of the game changed. And the moment it changed, the same people who were the best were mediocre. Why? Because there was a different strength needed. You needed more physical strength. You needed speed, which was not that which we had focused on.
What
so
makes
same
you
way
great
the
at the game
storytellers,
changes?
I think I'm relating to that. The same way, the storytellers actually are like that. Storytellers have actually been born to create a story with a medium there. So if you go back to the history, who are the best storytellers? Best storytellers are who speak and you listen. And who are those? Teachers, maybe this thing and listen. So it's all audio. It's not even video.
Sure.
What is the best storytelling which happened in India over the last, with brands when been made, has been TV. But now what is happening is, I think the digital has opened up so much and the rules are changing so much that you could be great in storytelling, but if you're not adapted to the new rules, you are not really up to it. And that's where the fundamental is. So I don't think people have, the craft has died. The people need to adapt to the way you need to build a story today.
Absolutely agree. I am. In fact, I am absolutely on board this rhetoric and belief as well. However, when we have a topic that says, is digital killing storytelling? I have a question for the three of you all. What are you all missing today? If you are saying digital is killing storytelling,
no.
What are you missing seeing today?
Nobody is saying digital is killing storytelling. We are
is
saying
digital.
is digital.
So what are you missing?
So no, the premise, like I set it up, is because people are saying, there's a buzz in this room. If you ask people, is digital creating storytelling, lots will say yes.
Right.
And that's the problem. So we need to end that conversation. Sorry, I'm going to come back to you, Aditya. So Siddharth, you've had in your role the last, say, 1.5 years at Vodafone was completely hectic because suddenly you had 25 new ways of telling stories. And you had to tell stories. Yeah. And suddenly you embraced all those 25 ways, thanks to partners. Storytelling didn't die.
No, not
yeah, though digital had come into play.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm a very, very firm believer in ecosystem partnerships, but I'll come to that in a moment. To what Amarjit said, I think it's useful for us to just hold that thought for a bit, that the rules of the game have changed, right? And so if we don't adapt, all of us, together as an ecosystem, obviously there will be some losers and some winners as the rules of the game change, as evidenced, let's say, in a sport like hockey. The frequent criticism that happens is that now, because we have an explosion of platforms, secondages come under question. So first we used to have the luxury of, let's say, a 60 or a 30. How will we tell a story and with emotion in 10 seconds or 15 seconds, etc.? And therein is, therefore, the need to reskill yourself, to look at a mindset change. And I'll basically, because it's almost lunchtime, I'm going to kind of start my argument in under 1 minute with a quiz question. Anyone here in this room knows the first ever TV ad made in the world, globally? 1940s, first ever TV ad made. Anyone? And then I'll look at you, Aditya.
Nobody knows it.
Okay,
Even
so
Aditya
it's 1940s Bulova Watch Company. The length of that TV ad was 10 seconds. Sound off. Sounds familiar to today's digital environment? So I think one is rules of the game have changed. Second is sometimes in life it comes full circle. Yeah. So I think great storytelling is enabled by understanding what consumers are doing, where consumers are watching content, and therefore communication, and therefore some form of advertising. And if consumer attention is now splintered across devices and primarily gathered onto mobile phone, I think it's only behooves marketeers, creative agencies, partners to look at building those muscles for communicating in a mobile world. To the point, and I kind of part agree to the fact that there are still some amongst us who need to beef up their creative muscle to say that, how do I really win in a world which has gone mobile? So for example, Facebook has launched something called the Facebook Creative Playground. Under that, a creative call to all agencies saying that come and participate in contests where you write short stories. Yeah, and this is stories which can be evocatively told in 10 seconds. Now, you might have this thought in your mind, how can you convey emotion in 10 seconds? Let me just tell you of the greatest story that I have heard, which is actually under 10 seconds, which is a story called Baby Shoes for Sale, full stop, never worn, full stop. I can't think of a more evocative story than that. And this is, of course, less than 10 seconds. So I truly believe that there are very many ways. Reskill yourself, work with partners, and therefore look at all the opportunities that presents itself to consumers.
Before I come to Amar, I tire myself by looking at a whole lot of advertising. I look at advertising all the time, consciously, unconsciously. And I do spend an inordinate amount of time with companies like Web Chutney or Autumn or whatever, looking at their work. And then I talk to them about where their problems lie. And the problems are not ever in the digital part. Their problems are all in the storytelling part. So I ask myself, what happens if I let Piyush Pandey lose with Aditya? Piyush can tell the story, Aditya can do the digital. I think that's where the problem is, that they're so sort of embraced by digital, they forget that you need a great creative director as well.
Piyush, if you're in the audience, let's do this.
Pardon?
If Piyush is in the audience, let's do this.
No, Piyush, no, he's on it.
If Piyush was in the audience, you'll be sitting here, we'll be listening. I think that's not...
No, but you're not thinking. Today the Prime Minister is getting sworn in, and Piyush is on a flight to Delhi.
I think I'll add on to that. I think this is a good part. So I think I was actually remembering this small story. I think actually about this guy who goes to prison for the first time.
He goes many times.
Prison, yeah. So somebody who goes to prison for the first time. Yeah?
Okay.
And he goes and I think he finds a lot of these prisoners out there, and here. There's not much activity that time, all these computers, and I mean, obviously you're not provided to the prisoners, but nothing, no mobile. So they used to have a joke book, and I'm quite sure you must have heard of it. There used to be a joke book with everybody. And they used to sit every day and recite those jokes to each other. And by the time, sometimes they reached a stage where everybody remembered the joke number, and they used to say 85, and everybody used to laugh. And they say 45, everybody used to laugh. And this new guy comes in and he says, "Yari, kya ho raha? What is happening here?" He says that people are narrating jokes. He says, "But I don't only hear the number." He says, "Oh, we have read it so many times, everybody knows it, so you can also try." So he gets bold, gets up, and he says, "Okay," he stands up and he says, 26. And there's a complete silence. And I think he says, "What happened?" He says, "Some people just don't know how to tell jokes." So the question is that we actually are, the real problem lies here. Some people just can't tell stories. So I think that then let's not blame the tools for it. So we need to get, I think the answer, I think the point out there, we have to get great storytellers and then mix them with the best tools. I think whether it's digital or whether it is offline, I think you can create great stories everywhere.
I don't know how many of you have read John Hegarty's book on Hegarty on creativity. He's written a few books. Hegarty on creativity is a lovely book. And in there, hidden somewhere, because, small little sentence, he says, technology is the handmaiden of creativity. So, I love that line. And then I spoke to him. And if you haven't met Dave Trott, he's speaking here today and tomorrow, meet him. Because they're both cut from the same cloth. They're very simple people and very rustic in their thinking. So I asked John, what do you mean? He said, technology is a servant. Treat it as a servant. It should come into the room when you want it to, leave the room when you want it to, sit down when you tell it to, stand up when you tell it to. But the idea is supreme, is the point. Now, we are forgetting that without an idea, all the technology in the world cannot make you laugh, talk, dance, nothing. You look at one of the oldest digital ideas to my mind was a website called Subservient Chicken. Yeah. How many of you have seen it or remember it? A few have, which is lovely. So, to those who haven't, subservientchicken.com, that was the URL.
Burger King.
Burger King. And it had a chicken on the screen and a small place for you to type in a word. You said dance, you typed in D-A-N-C, the chicken danced. You said pick up a book from the bookshelf. Chicken went, picked up a book and brought it. Said sleep, chicken slept. That's all it did. But it just captured the imagination of people. You spend time trying to challenge the damn chicken. I mean, look at our brains. Trying the chicken to do things that you thought the chicken could not do.
Just one second of context from a brand point of view, why they did that. Burger King's entire deal is have it your way, right?
Yeah.
So this chicken will be any way you want. You want it grilled, you wanted this, you wanted this, da-da-da. So they created subservient chicken for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Amar, you had something to say.
No, I think it's coming to the point where I think we all agree that digital is not killing storytelling, not the millennial one. I think they're really not killing storytelling. I think digital is probably enhancing storytelling to a different level. I think that's what I think the debate should be about. And how is it enhancing, I think, is a question we need to ask ourselves. I think maybe I can kick it off. I think the way I see it enhancing is that I think when you look at historically, I think we used to tell a story and it used to be one-sided kind of a thing.
Absolutely.
But now I think everybody can tell story. I mean, now because of the tools, because of the platforms available, I think people can tell their own story. So I think if you think you are a storyteller and you are a special profession, then I think, let's be very frank, all the people who have the tool in their hand, which is a mobile, everybody thinks now they're a storyteller. So the question is, how do you stand out from quality versus quantity? And I think at some point of time, quality always wins, but at some point of time, the quantity becomes so much, and you're able to experiment so much that the quality will emerge out of the quantity. So that's the challenge which we are facing. And I think the second piece within that is that the way people are, people are participating in the story. So you can start with the story. And by the way, I mean, example comes back to what we did at Singh. The whole idea was not to create our own, there's a playlist for that. The idea was for people to get that and think from there. And I think we saw that happening on social media and everywhere, where people started relating to situations and then saying like, okay, on the Spotify handle, if you go and check it out, people reached out, I'm not able to sleep. Can you suggest me is there a playlist for that? I'm not able to do this. So I think people reached out to that level, that playlist for that became a lingo
Huge
that they started using. So I'm just giving you a Spotify example because probably that's what I'm closest to.
No,
but I think there are many.
I'm going to stop you here for a second. Now let's suppose the insight on the table was there's a playlist for that, right? And let us suppose we rewound the clock 30 years to a non-digital world. What are the things you could have done with it? Yeah, there's a lot you could have done. Now we come to today. There's a lot you can do. You go back 10 years, pre-Twitter. No, Twitter's about 12, whatever. Imagine 15, you go back. It limited you. Every time there's a change in technology or new technology, there are more things you can do. But the idea is there's a playlist for that. That is the point I'm trying to make here.
No. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. There is no way I can sell anything. There is no way I have sold anything in my career without focusing on the idea being a core of it. But to me, technology is not a servant, it is a friend. Because a friend, you have to understand the friend. The servant, you can tell the servant whatever you want. Unless I understand technology and treat it with the same respect that it treats me as a user, then I think I have a servant, but essentially the servants are planning a coup. And in that coup, suddenly I'm pitching something without actually knowing what the technology allows me to do.
If there's a coup, you will die and so will the servant.
So
that is the problem. That's the problem.
But nobody wins. Just one moment I wanted to spend on Raman mentioned last time. I think absolutely agree with you. I think no one is disagreeing that the idea has to be at the core of it. Absolutely. However, in that spirit of what can we do to enhance it, so over the next couple of years, etc. Few things which I think are confusing us and keeping us in this weird limbo. Right? Towards better storytelling, better creative work, all of that.
Improve your storytelling and cut to the chase.
I think we're creating today, what we're creating is a lot of correct advertising. Because we have been told what is correct. What Facebook tells us, Google tells us, all fantastic recommendations. It means that we are more equipped to create correct advertising. How much of that correct advertising is great advertising? I don't know. For instance, if you were to take last year's, I think one of my most favorite pieces of storytelling was the Kerala's open film. Autumn, I think.
That was Autumn, yeah.
It was a video that was longer than a minute. If you were to look at the strict guidelines that a social media platform tells you to do, it does not follow all of that. But like you said, that was that qualitative edge which made it go from most correct advertising for the platform to actually great advertising.
But by the way, I disagree with you, but most correct, most successful on a metric you have chosen for it. There's nothing correct. Facebook or Google don't tell you this is correct or wrong. They tell you some best of class things which
But
which
how much of that is followed?
No, it is not. It's not. They're not saying it's correct. They're giving you metrics. Now you do what
The
you want.
problem is so much of that.
No, they don't tell you don't do 3-minute films or 8-minute films. Please go ahead and do it. If you can hold the attention of, if your storytelling can hold the attention of the consumer for 8 minutes or 1 hour, 2 hours, or like you do binge watching,
absolutely.
for,
That is on
for
us.
2
I'm not
weeks.
disagreeing with that.
So, Siddharth, are you being punished by your, no, are you, meaning is the digital ecosystem getting punished because it's over-metricized?
You could, in a way, say that. There's an interesting way to frame this topic. Has digital killed storytelling? I would argue the only people who are crying out loud that digital is killing storytelling are the storytellers who are getting killed by digital.
Absolutely, yeah.
I agree.
Which are the storytellers who may not have adapted to the rules of the hockey game, which, by the way, has changed. And so, therefore, in all humility, borrowing from the Spotify line, if you're looking to do storytelling on digital platforms, there is a playbook for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just like
Sure.
you have various different playlists, there is a playbook for understanding how do you hold consumer attention, what are the key messages that go, and because there are metrics available, this is not his view, her view, but this is what consumers are doing on platforms. And so therefore it's very efficient in that sense. That still does not stop great storytellers from figuring out an interesting idea. And it becomes a great idea when there are enough people interested in that idea. So, for example, the Kerala campaign that you spoke about, Anusha, good friend from Autumn, she never thought about platforms when she started, right? She was thinking about there is a core message that I have to convey, and how can I convey the message? She was not thinking 60 seconds, 120 seconds at that point in time. So it's the core idea, and then you can apply it on the right platform.
Sorry.
No, I think somewhere I think we're also, because I think we're talking of an idea which is, we should be very sure that if digital has not really killed storytelling, which we are saying, I think then we should be saying that it should be easy to make storytelling on that. I think that's also not true, by the way. So I think I'm building brands, I built it in the part of a brand in the past, we're doing it now. I think when we sit down to really look at, how do we go and build a story and all that, it's easier said than done. I think we have to understand that the idea is not about it's moved from a TV to a digital or something like that. It's become very dispersed. The same audience is actually not now, on one platform. And I think this is a large country. People forget that how big we are as a country. And to make a brand, if you're making a brand for a city, it's fine. But if you're making a brand for the country, it is not an easy job to build a brand in this country. So digital, there could be a playbook for that, but I would love to see that playbook because I personally believe we need that playbook. And I think because what is happening here is that I think at all the time, because there are two things more. There is also a lot of people doing the same thing. And after some time, as a consumer, I am saying because I think I put myself in the consumer shoes, and when I look at TV ads and communication, I actually feel like, deja vu feeling all the time. Oh, I've seen this somewhere. And what is that about? I can give a story example from Bollywood. So look at Bollywood music today. After all the great music, what have we come back to? Remixes. So imagine a kind of an industry which is doing crores and crores. We are back to remixes. Why? Because after some time, the story starts to dwindle.
Sure.
And you finally realize that the story which we told 20 years back or 10 years back is still the strongest story. And that is what is happening out there. And differentiating yourself within that story is even more difficult.
Absolutely. I don't think that's even that's a very accurate trend in Bollywood. It even occurs in technology. Instagram's first aesthetic was a Polaroid picture. When Instagram first started, what they were going for was this aesthetic that makes your pictures look a little more faded, a little older than how it was. So going back in time, getting that anew, etc., absolutely common trend, Not disagreeing with that at all. But on your point on whether we do need a playbook, right? I have a slightly different opinion on that. Anant, your interview with Chuck Porter once, I remember there was this, you had asked him a similar question on what is the marketing playbook for today? You know, like 20 years ago, we had the books, we had this thing. What do we look at? What is that one place we can look at? I noticed in your question, there was a tone of, you know what, clear the clutter for me. And
No,
present,
that tone is in any conversation I have with anybody.
Makes sense.
Because the whole philosophy of MELT, from the time it started, is clear the clutter for the audience.
Sure.
So it's not so much for me as clear the clutter for the audience. If you're asking this question, is because through conversations that I've had, the consumers, users of this talk, want the clutter removed.
Absolutely, and and as someone in that group as well, I loved Chuck Porter's reply to that, because he said, "I don't have a playbook. My playbook right now is do what feels amazing today," right?
No, absolutely. You know, so this is where I'm saying, I've tried to imagine a digital communication partner to him, not to Facebook, saying, suppose he wants to be satisfied on day one, right? I think the easiest thing for him to buy is a partner who can do great storytelling. Not great digital. You know, we've gotten so caught up in that. If he could be sure that digital will also be a part of the storytelling. So imagine your name, you know, whether Balki, Aggie, Piyush, what of them. Imagine them with a 25-year-old kid. And I think that's the magic of the future. There's a storytelling capability which is unquestionable. And there's an understanding, like you said, you want to understand the servant. I think it's very difficult for all storytellers to understand the servant well. But knowing the servant well without being able to tell stories is impossible. It's useless. Yeah. It's absolutely of no use.
Yeah, but I think somewhere we are actually relating storytelling to building brands, to basically advertising. I think
sure.
If you look at today's scenario, I think how many of you are watching OTTs and all that, binging on content without ads? You know, I think on Spotify also we have...
I pay you 120 rupees a month.
Just to avoid ads.
Just to avoid the
so
ads.
Imagine, you know, on one side we want to build, you know, we want to go on digital and kind of, you know, no, and we're talking digital that actually allows us to tell stories, and we can want to run ads for digital. On the other hand of it, people don't want ads. You know, so in a way, if you go forward 5 years from now, a scenario where no ads, where will the advertising happen then? So I think that's where I think we need to start.
You know,
that's
where
I think the things will start. I think the fundamental brand story is the content marketing. So I think to some extent, I think on Spotify, like for example, we also have podcasts. Now you can tell your story to podcast. Right. So I think the thing is that you can come and talk to your story. Your brand associates with this topic. Let's say it's about something you care about, women safety. I think, or driving or something. You can create a podcast, come and this thing, and you create your brand story. Now that is not advertising in a way. It is a subtle form of communicating, but that's where what you believe in.
Because I have a small counter to that. I have small counter to that. Because you, I think where we were going with is some form of an advertorial type content.
No, he's not.
Even if it's in a podcast.
He's saying association with content that I want.
I think he's
saying there's content I want, and a brand can associate with that particular content. So, now, for example, you go to Google search. Let's say you want to know, continuously you're reading about quality of air in Bombay. So there's a market for content on quality of air. And then he said, a related company, say Kent, advertises, sponsors that.
I think let's do a live case. I think it's from urgency.
Sure,
let me give a live case. Let's do a live case. So let's say we cannot create an ad now. I cannot create an ad. Okay, so no wait. You're the expert in digital, but I have to convey my story as a brand to people, but they will not listen, watch, or see any ad. How will I communicate my story to people as a brand?
Are you asking like on digitals, particularly on Spotify? Oh yeah. No, there are.
Forget Spotify.
There are multiple ways to do it. See, the thing is, interesting point right now.
Yeah, you could have started by saying, I'm good at what I do. I don't give advice for free, but your choice.
No. Today is 40 minutes of free advice. So, so it's an interesting point because influencers were one good way out of this, right? Like on digital, one small bit, but influencers was one way of telling your story without it seeming like an ad. Until very recently, when on now both Facebook and Instagram, you need the influencer to call out that it is a paid partnership with a brand. And that is considered the usual standard. So there's no, that gray is something that even Facebook and Instagram are like, asking the influencer to stop doing and to announce that this is a commercial. So no, I don't have.
I think you answered my question anyway. I think you said influencers. Now,
Yeah.
if you expand the word influencers, you're actually saying somebody else tells your story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Simple.
You can't tell your own story.
You can't tell your own story because now you can't pay for the guy watching it. You have to pay your story
No,
to somebody,
Absolutely.
and that's the answer. Actually.
You know, I think of all over here, none of the three was present for Sodhi's talk. And how many of you were down for Sodhi's talk? So that little bit he did on celebrities, I think was a masterclass. You know, they don't pay a single celebrity.
I'm a big fan of
And
RSS.
they've reached a situation where celebrities, you know, I don't think he told you that. PR agencies call up Amul often. Can you somehow feature this film in your next campaign? Can you feature this?
It's the most
this
iconic.
person?
I think Amul campaign most iconic.
And it's fantastic. Anyway, we are running short of time and everybody's going to run for lunch. So I'm going to end with a plug for myself. So many years ago, I used to work in advertising. And we won a brand called Foster's Beer. And, you know, like his problem that he, you know, tabled just now, Foster's was not allowed to advertise. And unlike other alcohol brands, they decided they would not do surrogate advertising. So there was a guy called Pradeep Gidwani who was my client, and he wanted a plan. And 1 week later, I gave him a plan. The plan was a list of 50 people that I knew. And I said, send them a case of beer every Thursday. So he said, what happens? I said, they'll drink the beer. And I said, next Thursday, send them another case of beer. And I said, then they'll start selling your beer. Because by now he's got 15 beers in his house. So anybody who comes to his house says, what do you have to drink? He said, I'll have a whiskey. We said, no, have a beer first. It's a great beer. It's, you know, Foster's beer. It's a great beer. Have the beer first. So there's storytelling and there's storytelling.
All panelists get a beer? Crate of beer from you?
Well, we got Heineken downstairs
Okay,
that we'll
fantastic.
give you.
So I think since we are plugging, and let me also plug something then. So I think
The whole show's been a plug for Foster, for Spotify. From beginning to end. You know, Facebook is not even mentioned.
I think this is an amazing topic, and I think I thank you for listening to us. I think we really enjoyed talking about it, but happy to keep on this debate. I don't think we have the perfect playbook for that, but keep chatting, and ever we meet anytime, just let's continue this chat. Yeah.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Amar. Thank you, Aditya.